welcome you all for this very interesting, slightly different, I'll call it rather a detour from the regular topics which we have been doing so far in pharma and healthcare. And we are going to touch upon some very interesting topic called stem cell therapy. And while deciding on this topic, we had some kind of a debate, not even argument, but discussion that let us not go technical because this topic can become very technical. And it's a very relevant and very important topic. And what we are going to do today, rather than I moderating, I, Darren, and Shreya, my core team, are going to ask questions each other, more of a fireside chat. Of course, we all will not be speaking together, but we are trying to deviate from that. In the last session on clinical trials, we discussed that medicine is a blend of art and science, both. But sometimes medicine becomes philosophy also. Why it becomes a philosophy? Because there are so many things in medicine which does not have answer. And that is why doctors keep on saying that miracles can happen, miracles will happen. And in my professional career as a special ENT surgeon, I have seen at least four miracles, which I was sure that this cannot happen, and they really happen. And because there is no answer to it. Same way, there are certain things which does not have answer but keep going, but they should keep going. And that is why the philosophy element came. Let us think of two or three questions like what shape is a wish? What does happiness look like? What is the color of the smell of your most favorite perfume? What does inspiration taste like? They appear very easy, but they don't have answer. And I don't want you to think those lines because that is why there are no answers to such questions. That way, how stem cell therapy would work, will work, is working. Though we know it can work, it is working in some places, we are going to discuss. And that is why it is said that medical profession has two sides of coin, being sad and being happy. Being happy, fortunately, is bigger, and being sad is slightly smaller. Why being sad? Sometimes we feel that we cannot do for this patient. Sometimes doctors feels why there is nothing to treat this patient. And that is where I think the challenge a doctor faces is the disease is so difficult. Mounts the frustration on part of a doctor why there is nothing that is available. Why I am not being able to treat this patient. That is where possibly the people, the scientists, companies, doctors, all over the world keep working on something. And that is what we are going to discuss something today. And that is what stem cell therapy is. Not a new word in India, definitely. Not even in world, because various countries like US, Japan, China, all have recognized this in some form. In some places it is a drug, some places country is heavily funded. Japan is a country which has huge faith in this science and looking forward to something big happening. Technically, nothing big has happened so far, but I'm sure that this science is definitely is going to be there, provided we have something solid. And that is what we are going to discuss today. And that is why the topic stem cell therapy in India ready for a big leap. And this leap is a challenge because it is said that when there are no laws, there are so many laws. When there is no regulation, there are no regulations. Some feel it is not a regulation, but it's a strangulation. And that is where I think the stem cell therapy entire science possibly is passing through. I think in one of the sessions we had, and my colleague Mihir had a great presentation on 5G where he gave analogy to the good, the bad, and the ugly of Clint Eastwood thing. He compared. The same thing possibly is happening when it becomes when you talk of stem cell therapy in India. Let me give you broadly, without going too much into the technicalities, what stem cell is. Many of you all who are there must be knowing, must have heard, maybe somebody's relative suffering from disease or something might have tried sorry, stem cell therapy. But stem cell therapy is a therapy in which a cell from within the body are given, are injected again to that patient. I don't want to go into detail. Cells can be of the same person, cells can be of the other person. Now, if you really see, as I mentioned, stem cell therapy is hope. In all sessions, I think this is eighth or ninth session on healthcare, and one word somehow keeps coming up is hope. And yes, that hope, I would rather say not the hope, but actually is a panacea for any stubborn diseases. The stem cell therapy is. But when it comes to India or even world, is it accepted? Is it legal? I don't want to touch upon the ethical part at present because I'm just going to briefly tell you about what the stem cell is, what the stem cell therapy is, because it is going to be important for you to have some kind of a basic understanding about the entire concept. Now, stem cells are just cells which are present in the body, which are generated, and they usually generate to create another cells. There is slightly uh, technical. There's a concept of endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm, and these are the three tubes when fetus is being turning into a body in mother's womb. This ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm become various organs, right from peripheral organs to visceral organs, right from heart, lungs, colon, intestine, everything. And this is where the stem cells come into picture. Now, the stem cells are a kind of a raw material in a very simple language. And when these cells, which are taken out from that particular organ, you would have heard there is something called cord blood collection, that whenever a child is going to be born or the lady goes into the labor and the baby is born, there is a concept of collecting cord blood. The cord is umbilical cord, which is between placenta and the umbilicus of the newborn. And they cut and every time baby is born, the cord needs to be cut, and the cord is very rich into various nutrients. And this cord blood is considered to be the most rich in the stem cells. And that is where cord blood collection concept has come, which my colleague Darren and Shia will touch upon later. Now, these cells, when they are treated in the right conditions, whether it is within the body or in the lab, in a petri dish or in anyway, there is something, a lot of testing happen. They create some cells called daughter cells. And these daughter cells again self-generate within the body. They are called self-generating or self-renewal stem cells, or they become a specialized cell which are called differentiated cells, or cells coming out because of differentiation, which give rise to formation of specialized functions like blood cells, bone marrow, muscle cells, or bone per se. All these things come from, that is where the concept of mesoderm and ectoderm and endoderm, which I mentioned, comes. Now, interesting part is this type of capacity or a capability is only in stem cell. No other cell in the body has a natural ability to generate on its own. Now, this is interesting because of this thing, and they can be converted, modified into lab as well as the entire stem cells therapy science or stem cell uh, science has come into picture, where the blood is collected, and as and when there is a requirement, a stem cell can be created into the lab subject to various conditions, HLA typing, all those things. But the same stem cell, when injected back, which is your own cell, or there's something called donor cells also, that whenever, if anybody has experienced donating blood, the cord blood, there is another consent that you allow them to use these cells for use of somebody else when there is a need. And that is why the applications of stem cell therapy has become very wide. It can be used for any stubborn diseases, whether it is a Parkinson's, whether it is a ALS, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Everybody remembers ice bucket challenge of ALS, the same ALS I'm talking about, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Parkinsonism, spinal cord diseases, which are very stubborn. These are the diseases which can be treated if done properly in a proper way, which we are going to discuss. But primarily, because of the regenerative nature of stem cells, they are used more for degenerative diseases. You can create now. Let me give a very crude example. Suppose there is one particular part is cut because of trauma, or let me go, there is something called ureter, which is between kidney and bladder. If it is cut and if stem cell therapy is very much there and there is a proper infrastructure, lab, etc., a possibility is there that collecting the blood from the patient, creating homogeneous stem cells for ureter and injecting back into that patient may create formation, regeneration of new ureter, and patient may become all right. Looks very theoretical, but it is possible. So these are the things, and that is where I think Chirag also in last session mentioned about lifestyle diseases which are becoming prevalent in India and across the world, which have become more challenging. Stem cell has become very important for type 1 diabetics. Type 1 diabetes is the one where patients require only insulin, and that is where stem cells help in generating insulin. People can get treated. So I think this is what stem cells is, and that is where I think again the hope element comes. But now that hope needs to become reality. Japan accepted is the most important regenerative, possible potential regenerative cure, and they are doing a lot of research and focusing on that particular part. But India, we need a lot of, we need to connect a lot of dots. So to make this hope a reality, we need some kind of ecosystem where the players, whether they are scientists, whether they are doctors, whether they are laboratories, or even our doctors like gynecologists or any other doctors, can play a role in developing this particular science. And that is where I think we are going to discuss today. And that is where I think the ethics comes into picture. The biggest challenge today in India, because of certain kinds of regulations, etc., that most of the practices are considered to be, I will not call it illegal, but it is definitely considered to be unethical practices. Not because they are doing it, the way it is being done is becoming a big challenge. So that is what I think we are going to discuss today, what exactly the stem cell therapy is. So I think, Darren, I want to start with you. Let us start the ball rolling, discussing. Uh, Ethics, as I mentioned, has become a huge concern in India. That and because of that becomes controversial also. That authorities think it is illegal. There are provisions that you can complain to some extent. So there is absolutely controversies, ethical. Can you just highlight few of these concerns in stem cell therapy in India? Let us discuss initially what are these concerns and basics, and then we see how exactly we can leapfrog. So, can you start talking on that?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Dr. Dhanu. And I'm glad we're getting the negatives out of the way so that we can get into more positives while we discuss. And in any case, because I mean, at the end of the day, we can a gold mine, and because of the fact that they just are these undifferentiated cells that can turn into anything that's required by the body at the end of the day, so that the research involved in that area becomes so crucial, and a lot of companies are looking at how they can maybe get into better diagnostics, better treatment, so on and so forth. But at the same time, there are multiple ethical concerns, and a lot of them have to do with how that gold is mined, for lack of better way of putting it. But and to put it a little more technically, it's in retrieval and procurement of the biological material that is used later on for use as stem cell therapies or stem cell research. Now, as Dr. Andani very well put, a lot of these stem cells that are required for the research and therapy are found in embryo development. They're found in the fetus, they're found in the embryo, and they're found in the umbilical cord itself. So when it comes to collection, the first thing that you need to know is that the donation of the oocytes, to get into a little bit of technicals, but the donation of the oocytes itself,
Just to stop
it
you there,
poses some.
oocytes
Yeah,
are eggs in a common language.
correct.
Oocytes are egg.
Yeah, and a lot of what researchers then use for research purposes would be that particular egg itself, and that is to be collected when the embryo itself is growing. So we're looking at a situation where there may be multiple oocytes in the body of a woman who is looking to get into the fertility and so on and so forth. But at the same time, that collection of the oocyte itself poses some amount of medical risks. As with every procedure, there are multiple medical risks that could come out of, any sort of research program. But given that it is, in the area of research, there needs to be awareness and informed consent that is taken, before such a oocyte donation is even taking place. So there is a requirement that, especially, in developing countries, and of course even in other countries, that the patient, or the person who is donating for the purpose of research is very well aware of the risks involved. And the reason I'm saying this is because there are also commercial considerations that are involved, to the extent that, in certain jurisdictions, you find that you can receive payment for donation of oocytes. So what that means is that, if you are somebody who is trying to conceive, and in that process, if you are well to do, or for whatever reason, without understanding the risk of making that donation, you may be incentivized to donate the oocytes, particularly just for payment purposes. Now, the payment connection with research has always been a very gray, not a very good area, to the extent that, even today for clinical trials, we have tried more, and even in the law today, especially in India, we tried our best to make sure that patients aren't compensated for having turned up for a trial. Because in no way should the patient be incentivized to do something that is of risk without actually understanding how exactly these things take place. So, of course, apart from the medical risk, you also have to understand that today, one area of research that involves stem cells is also in the area of infertility. So a lot of the oocyte collection and the oocyte donation that takes place is for women that deal with infertility. So there needs to be a line that is drawn, because if now researchers are collecting whatever oocyte is available with a person suffering from infertility, you are reducing the chances of that woman being able to conceive in the first place. So you go to an infertility treatment, you are then told that there is an option of you donating whatever oocytes you have for the purpose of medical research, and then you are accordingly lowering your chances of pregnancy itself. So again, it ties back to the fact that informed consent becomes a very important criteria, so that the women are able to make that decision correctly. Another, a sticky situation that, some countries face, and it happens in different jurisdictions. But basically, the collection of fetal cells, and and that's basically the cells that are found within the fetus itself, because they also contain a lot stem cells that can be used. Now, the issue with collection of fetal cells is that it happens after an abortion takes place. So leave aside the fact that there are multiple ethical issues with abortion and whether it's permitted or not in different jurisdictions, not just in India, but in many jurisdictions that question is still being debated. But it also becomes a little difficult, because if you now incentivize the donation of oocytes and fetal cells, and on top of that, you also realize that there are benefits to having fetal cells donated. Are you in some way trying to promote abortion in some form? Are you only developing the embryo specifically for research purposes? So these are all ethical gray areas that have to be addressed, and certain checks and balances have to be put in place so that these practices are not conducted in any form. And the last ethical concern I'd like to share is, of course, that there activities that take place whereby the human DNA is used along with animal DNA, for various reasons, particularly because there isn't enough human oocytes or embryos to be using as a host cell while trying to research um, in the lab. And because of these issues, sometimes animal cells have to be used along with human cells, which leads to that scientific dilemma of whether you are creating some sort of chimera or a hybrid person. But largely, the fact that, I mean, the fundamental principle remains that if you are manipulating with genetic material, it shouldn't cause some sort of a long-term concern for the human population. It shouldn't then make its way into the main DNA strains, and accordingly go down the reproductive channel. So these are some of the issues that we see standpoint, but there are multiple advantages and applications that we see for stem cell research and therapy today. And for that, I'd like Shreya to maybe cover some of that too.
Thank you, Dan. So just to sort of take over and understand what the implications of stem cell therapies are, the main thing to be kept in mind is that despite these ethical concerns with respect to how stem cells should be harvested and how they should be used, stem cell therapy continues to be used and applied in India. And some of the more popular applications of stem cell therapy, and at least the one that's very clearly promoted in India, is one that is a very tried and tested method, which is the use of hematopoietic stem cells for treatment of various hematological, immunological, and metabolic disorders. So, what do I mean by that very multi-syllabic sentence? Essentially, hematopoietic cells are cells that are found in your bone marrow. They're a type of cell that when they multiply, they form some form of red blood cells itself. So when they multiply, they only form very specific sorts of cells and not other types of cells. So usually these are used to cure any blood disorders or rare disorders that people may have with respect to red blood disease, red blood cells. So that's the very obvious and the main implication of stem cell research. The other implication, and this legally is not considered to be stem cell research, but can be stem cell research, is the use of PRP treatments or platelet-rich plasma, which is essentially and it's very commonly used for healing wounds, and it's even actually been used for some cosmetic procedures, like people who suffer from male pattern and female pattern baldness. PRP is said to be able to help them regrow hair. So the way PRP functions is they draw a little bit of blood from the arm, and then they process that blood. They divide it into three components: red blood cells, platelet poor plasma, and platelet rich plasma. And this platelet rich plasma is supposed to be very rich in nutrients and helps increase blood flow or blood circulation and provides nutrients to the relevant area, and is often injected back where our body needs the extra help, and is another application of stem cells. So those are the two main and legal applications of stem cell technology in India at the moment. I would like to, hand over. I would just like to go back to Darren so that he can talk to us a little bit about. Actually, I would like to sort of go back to Doc, and so he can talk to us a little bit about how stem cell therapy is regulated in India and what are the overall general guidelines for it.
Thank you, Shreya. I think yes, you were rightly mentioned that when it comes to India, what she mentioned about bone marrow transplant and nimble cells are only the authorized therapeutic procedures that is permissible under law. And what else, everything that is happening, whether it is for Parkinson's, whether it is for Alzheimer's or spinal cord disorders, all are considered to be as a clinical trials under law. But before I move on to the regulatory part, whatever that covers this interesting science, I'll just go back to what Darren mentioned. And that is where I think the evolution of regulation also took place globally. So he mentioned about collecting fetal cells, and that is where he mentioned about the biggest ethical concerns on collection fetal cells and abortions, which is actually medical termination of pregnancy happening. Now, there was one very interesting incident happened, and that is where I think the entire concept of cloning, really human cloning, came into picture. We had Dolly and Polly, the Dolly the sheep and Polly the sheep, they cloned sheep. But concept of human cloning also really happened few years ago. And what we saw in Star Wars 2 or 3, Attack of Clones, I don't know which series, but that actually can happen. And that it happened actually in some form in Italy, where this was permissible. And as Darren mentioned, uh, there was a requirement of women becoming pregnant so that fetal cells can be collected through medical termination of pregnancy. It became a huge issue. And actually, uh, Pope also came into picture, and American President George Bush also came into picture, becomes a lot of regulatory concerns. And then it happened that fetus does not have, because it became to human feticide and all those issues happened. So the science came out that fetus in mother's womb does not get life for 14 days. So if fetus is removed in first 14 days, which technically is not very easy to find out those 14 days. But if that is done within 14 days from the first day of conception, then it was not considered to be a feticide and came out of the regulations and prohibition. Now, same way in India, there is no law. And as I mentioned that when there is no law, there are many laws which governs that particular product or process or service or science. But interestingly, you all know now you have heard name called ICMR because of COVID-19. And then people also say that India is possibly doing well because we believed more in ICMR and other global organizations. Because ICMR has come out with excellent guidelines. Now, when guidelines come, it remains a guideline which provides guidance to all the stakeholders how to do that work. But whatever guidelines I have read in last 15, 16 years related to pharma, biotech, healthcare, medical device, I would put these guidelines, the national guidelines on stem cell research, as the top-notch guideline and excellent, very clear, amazing guidelines which gives complete clarity on all the functions, roles, responsibilities, ethics and law, as well as liabilities. But the problem with guidelines in India is that not every guideline is a binding guideline. So it becomes a self-regulation, and that is where the concept of ethics, which Darren mentioned, comes into picture. Now, this guideline, the national guidelines of stem cells, which came in 2017, it has been amended uh, quite a number of times, has also included now other guidelines also, because ICMR is another very important guidelines which we discussed in last session, is the guidelines for biomedical health research involving human beings or human participants. That also has been incorporated. So this guideline is the only regulation when it comes to how stem cell therapy can be processed. There are certain things which can be restricted, which are restrictive, prohibitory, or permissible. But apart from that, entire pharma healthcare is governed by a legislation called Drugs and Cosmetic Act and Drugs and Cosmetic Rules, which includes drugs. Now, this stem cell therapy, as I mentioned it, other than two indications of hematopoietic cells, all are considered to be clinical trials. So all stem cells are regulated for clinical applications under Drugs and Cosmetic Act, and all products which are derived out of stem cell research are considered to be a biologic products. Now, India has a huge, significant regulation for managing biologics. Importing biologics is a huge challenge. Exporting maybe not that difficult, but there is a significant legislation there. I don't want to go into that. But recently, very important thing that happened, and that possibility is a step forward. That yes, authorities are considered legislating stem cell research and therapy through some form of regulation. That under recent amendment of Drugs and Cosmetic Act, all stem cells and stem cell derived products are considered new drug. Now, the act treats new drug and regular drugs in a very different way. Because when it comes to new drug, you need a clinical trial, preclinical to phase one, phase two, phase three, and post marketing, purely from safety and efficacy. Not that because though people say that chances of safety are very less because it is called autologous, that is, the blood is withdrawn from the same patient and stem cells are given back to the same patient, is called autologous stem cells. But all these products are considered to be new drugs, and entire new therapy which is going to come will be considered as a new drug under law, and they will have to pass through that. And when it comes to new drug, there is one very important entity or a body comes into picture, which is called ethics committee. There is independent institutional ethics committee. So any trial that is happening in India must have approval from the institutional ethics committee. So whenever other than two applications which Shreya just mentioned, all are considered to be the clinical study stage, and that is why you need to have ethics committee, and ethics committee approval is required to carry out those type of therapy in which so many centers, so many doctors today are using stem cell therapy. I, in my personal experiences, have seen some very positive results. But again, coming back, they are all trials, and that is where the regulations really come to picture. But as I mentioned, because they included stem cells as a new drug, which definitely is a step forward. And I always believe that when it comes to pharma regulations, now it is four steps forward and maybe one or two steps backward. So, and that is where I personally feel, being a doctor as well as lawyer, and advise a lot of companies into this type of research, including cord blood banking. Yes, when it comes to regulation, let me also include one point, that collection of blood for stem cell is regulated under drugs and cosmetic rules. Just like the way blood banks are regulated, umbilical cord blood, you have so many, I don't want to name any of the organizations, but umbilical cord blood, so collection, storage, and distribution of cord blood is fully regulated under this law through a particular schedule in drugs and cosmetic rule. But what I mentioned, that the national guidelines of stem cells are so fine and so descriptive, to the point and very clear. I personally feel, and I'm sure my colleagues also would agree, that a time has come that the first step to leapfrog this science, because it can become a huge thing. Possibly, we could have had some solutions for the pulmonary complications of COVID-19 if we had some type of stem cell solution for that. I'm just, I'm just talking possibly out of blue, but that could have been possible. And that is where the hope element is always there in medical science. So Darren, I think I want you to quickly give an overview of this new guideline, which if becomes a law would be a great thing.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Dr. Antani. And I think you've covered it beautifully to the extent that, you know, we have a lot of things in place in terms of checks and balances, to the extent that these guidelines have been put out so comprehensively that it covers every aspect of stem cell research and therapy, and what is permitted and what is not permitted. To the and the principle or the guiding principle behind these guidelines are basically not to commoditize or exploit donors in any manner. And of course, the document has been divided into ethical considerations, scientific considerations, the commercial uses, so on and so forth. And I'll take a brief amount here and there in terms of what exactly it covers. So on the ethical considerations, it has already identified the kind of issues that we talked about earlier. And what it does in terms of trying to prevent these issues from taking place is it builds the informed consent process very clearly into the guideline. Says is that for all kinds of stem cell research, a video consent is required before procurement of any sort of biological material that will be used for stem cell research. Now, in the drug regulatory framework, a video consent is the highest threshold and is usually used in the case of drugs only when the population is considered to be vulnerable. So, when it comes to stem cell research, it has been identified that any person who will take part in such a trial will be considered as part of that kind of a category, and therefore the highest threshold for consent has been put in place, which is for video consent, and that is the most express form of consent that can be done. On the scientific side, there are many provisions put in place to ensure that there is quality assurance, and it specifically says that any sort of research that is to be conducted, any sort of facility that we use, needs to be approved as a good manufacturing that has been certified by the drug regulator, and all measures have to be put in place so that the kind of research that is being conducted there, it does not flow into any sort of commercial use, whereby the document itself has very clearly said that the commercial use of stem cells as a therapy is for the time being prohibited, only because so far there is very little scientific rationale that has been proven to work in terms of stem cell research and therapy, where trials are being conducted, that is being permitted, and research is being permitted. And the whole of the stem cell guidelines don't cover the hematopoietic stem cell research because that has been established to be something that works today. So commercial use for the time being has been prohibited. And as Dr. Nantani said, where you are trying to get into that approval process for commercial use, the Drugs and Cosmetics Acts will come into play. The various requirements for clinical research will be brought in when that angle comes in. But apart from that, we also have to see that the document, because it's been drafted by some of the chief scientists of the country sitting with the ICMR, it has gone down into the very nitty gritties of how exactly stem cells have to be classified. They broadly classified into somatic stem cells, into pluripotent stem cells, and how exactly each kind of stem cell can be used, how the manipulation of these stem cells can take place, and the extent of the manipulation that can take place, and the various approvals required for the extent of that manipulation itself. And apart from this, when it comes to the actual research, the roles and responsibilities of every person involved in that research trial, which is the investigator, the institution, and the sponsor, they are given very clear and crisp how exactly that entire process needs to take place. And as Dr. Antani mentioned, there is the independent ethics committee that is required in order to conduct any stem cell research. But the guidelines also recommend having one more additional committee, which is the Institutional Committee for Stem Cell Research. And both these committees have to oversee the entire trial during the duration of the research that's taking place. And apart from this, there are bodies that have been set up, which are the National Apex Committee for Stem Cell Research and Therapy, which also have oversight over all of these trials, because the institutional committees have to be registered and report to this Apex Committee while the trial is going on. Now, apart from this, the kind of research that can be conducted is also something that is covered. And it divides it into basic research, therapeutic research, as well as for other stem cell banking, cord blood banking. All of this is very clearly covered, and what needs to be done and what cannot be done is also very clearly put out. And the issue that we were talking about before in terms of the placental or fetal cells being collected, the guidelines very clearly talk about compliance with the medical termination of pregnancy legislation in India before any of these kind of activities can take place. So to the extent that it can, it has tried to regulate even the collection of placental cells. Now, there are particular buckets of research that are permitted, restricted, or prohibited. And I think I'll hand it over to Shreya to maybe get into some of the details of that. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much, Darren. So, the stem cell guidelines, like Darren and Doc have been talking about, are very clear on what is permitted and what is not permitted. So, obviously, like we spoke about earlier, hematopoietic transfer of cells is permitted because that's already clinically established, and autologous transfer of cells is also permitted because it's not considered stem cell transplantation but merely a cell-derived product transplantation. So those two are very clearly in the OK list, no permissions required list, right? But apart from that, with respect to research and development of any clinical therapies using stem cells, there are three buckets that the stem cell guidelines categorize these therapies/research into. The first is the permitted bucket, the second is the restricted bucket, and third is the prohibited bucket. So I've sort of been going over what's in each bucket, and rather than getting into technicalities, I'm just going to give a general overview of the type or the nature of activity that comes under each. So if you look at the permitted activity, almost any kind of in vitro study or clinical trial is permitted. That means that it does not involve any human beings or any animals. It probably involves stem cells, but it happens outside of the body of the human or an animal. What is noteworthy, however, so obviously when it's permitted, it's not like you don't need to take permission from anyone or need to inform anyone. You still obviously need to inform some people. So for instance, you have to collect the embryos from the hospitals. So naturally, you'd have to inform and get informed consent from the patients who would be giving you the embryos. You would also need like certain permissions if you are breeding animals to conduct any of these tests, and you'd also need permission from any institutional ethics committee that's going to oversee the trial. That bit is common throughout. Like there's always going to be an institutional ethics committee that will be overseeing the trial. So in the permitted section, we have in vitro studies, and we have any studies for the establishment of new embryonic cell lines, like stem cell lines from spare embryos, or stem cell lines that are derived from adult cells. So those are in the permitted buckets. So and for those, it's probably a little bit more easier to get permission. The next thing is the restricted bucket, where it's not prohibited, but there are a lot more conditions or hoops that need to be followed before any of these things can be done. So what is essentially prohibited is cell manipulation at a non-human level. So it means that or in vitro or like creation of an embryo beyond for the purposes of IVF. So these are the two main buckets. The first is creation of human embryos without using IVF. So currently what happens in practice is, if you want to do stem cell research, you go to an IVF clinic and maybe they have embryos that are not going to be implanted into the uterus of a woman, either because she's already pregnant or she's decided to not get pregnant anymore. So you use a spare embryo that's already available, and then you maybe do research with that. The restricted research is for creation of a new embryo using IVF. And to get this permission, you have to specifically prove why a spare embryo is not going to work, and you need to create a new embryo to do this particular kind of research. And this also touches a little bit upon the ethical concern that we highlighted before about the commodification of human cells and tissues, where we're putting a value on what a fetus is or on how much an embryo possibly costs. Another thing that's restricted is clinical trials using stem cells of any type, source, and level of manipulation for transplantations that are not particularly already permitted. So for things that are not already like clearly clinical indications, you have to take permission, one from the stem cell committee at the institutional level with the institutional ethics committee, and very remarkably from the drug controller, which is the Central Drug Standard Control Organization. So normally when you're taking approval from the CDSCO, which is the drug regulator, you only need to do it if you're planning on marketing the drug. But notably, in the case of doing some sort of restricted research, you need to take permission from the CDSCO, even if you're not planning on using that particular stem cell research to market a drug maybe in the future. Then it's also restricted to import stem cells, and they're more careful about clinical trials that are sponsored by multinationals and research that involves the introduction of embryonic stem cells into animals, studies in chimeras, which are a mixture of two species of animals, a human and animal, and genome modification. So these are heavily restricted. And here when we talk about genome modification, we only talk about modification at a genetic level and not introducing that gene into a human being, which comes under the prohibited category. And that brings us to our last bucket, which is the prohibited category in case of stem cell research. So this essentially, this category is you cannot do research with respect to this. It would not be strictly legal. And so it's prohibited. So what are prohibited research? All research that involves research on the embryo beyond the initial period of 14 days, as we discussed, or implantation of that embryo that has been manipulated into the uterus of another woman, or you know or introducing stem cells which may lead to chimeras and have chimeras which can pass down their cells, so essentially creation of a new artificial species. Those are things that are forbidden. Secondly, the thing that's forbidden is anything that might lead to the creation of quote unquote designer babies. Designer babies are essentially embryos whose genes have been manipulated to favor certain traits over other traits. So anything to do with that, which is genome modified human embryos, germline gene editing, or use of germline stem cells or gametes for developmental propagation, which is to develop fully a stem cell that's been manipulated, is very strictly prohibited. So given that we have so much comprehensive legislation and guidance on what is permitted, prohibited, and restricted, I would like to give Darren an opportunity to talk about what are some measures that India can take to exponentially increase the potential of stem cell research in India.
Sure. Thanks, Shreya. So I think, as Dr. Nathani mentioned and you mentioned, and picking up from where you left, we have a lot of the guidelines, the restrictive nature of the entire process in place. The only issue is, and as we had discussed earlier, is that is it legally binding? Does it have the force of law? So we have put out such comprehensive guidelines that try and protect the interests of the donors, protect the interests of the human population as a whole. But at the same time, it still somehow doesn't have that force of law. Now, this is something that the government, in fact, the ICMR has pushed for in the past to try and incorporate the guidelines into the drug regulatory framework itself, so that it does get the force of law. There were, in fact, draft rules that were published earlier, which tried to incorporate these stem cell guidelines by reference into the drugs and cosmetics rules. But unfortunately, we didn't see the light of day in terms of those amendments. Maybe it's time to revisit whether we can somehow take benefit of the existing framework of guidelines and make them legally binding, so that we can take the next step in terms of trying to enhance the level of stem cell therapy and the stem cell research activities that take place today. Because we're looking at a lot of development, especially in the area of regenerative medicine, which doesn't necessarily involve having to get into the unethical aspects or some of the other side of things that we don't necessarily need to get into. For example, the amniotic fluid also contains a lot of usable and potent stem cells, which at the time of giving birth can be collected without any harm to any particular individual. And we are seeing that companies today are looking to even make that a commercial venture, to the extent of trying to collect amniotic, use that for different therapeutic purposes, such as for wound healing. We've seen different products come into the research space, such as bandages that contain this amniotic fluid, which quickens the entire healing process. So think of it as a bandage that has like this extra edge of being able to heal and not just be able to protect. So there are multitudes of research capabilities and therapeutic capabilities, but the first step would be to get the entire guidelines with legal effect. And from there, we can start to try and, depending on how well the entire guidelines have been adopted and the protective measures have been put in place, liberalize the entire sector to allow for what has now been established to be safe and efficacious for the public itself. So I think with that, maybe we could what the immediate need of the hour would be. And for that, I'll hand it back over to Dr. Antani.
Thank you very much, Darren, and very nicely put. And yes, I think I see. We are about to take that jump, that the jump or the whether it will be a leap of faith or not, that we will discuss. But I think you are right that we need to do something. We have guidelines, we have very clear-cut instructions, distinguishing between legality and being ethical. But I think the time has come in India definitely to look what exactly can be done. Now I see two or three points, and I think we also have few questions, two questions from Karthik Vyas and another person, Mr. Rashmikant Shah, has asked about stem cell research. And very rightly also, that is what I think I was also going to cover, that are we prepared? Do we have requisite skill force? That is number one. Number two, the timelines. Whenever there are clinical trials do happen, but the timeline taken for clinical trials involving some kind of a stem cell element does take longish time. So I will divide my answer into what needs to be done. The need, however, is I think two or three buckets. One is we need to develop the infrastructure. Number two, when I say infrastructure, do we have adequate laboratories, science, technology to manage this? Second is, do we have adequate skilled scientists? And third, do we have adequate legislation? That is where the concern on being ethical comes. Now, the most important thing, all these first two buckets can be managed by doing some kind of a collaborations. Collaborations could be Indian partner and global partner. We are seeing a lot of international collaborations. In fact, we have represented at least three clients in international collaborations in this space. But apart from that, I see a lot of collaborations with Indian government and bodies like ICMR, CSIR for adequate research and developing some kind of IP. So I see a time has come to think of public-private partnerships to take this. That is number one. Another important point I think need of the hour is to take uh, uh, research infrastructure. We need to have proper infrastructure. We do all lot of companies do trials and do a lot of HLA typing and other typing, etc., that is required is definitely done. But to do this, we need to develop good laboratories with best possible state-of-art technologies and science. But we need people to use those infrastructure, those research infrastructure, and we need to develop a very specific plan to develop scientists who are very good at stem cell research. And that is where I think the government, especially bodies like ICMR, would definitely come into picture. It is where the bucket comes into picture. The, as Darren Shreya discussed, the biggest concern is on unethical practices. And if you see the FAQs on ICMR website for stem cell, 95% of the questions are ethical part. That is the concern. I think the time has come to create some kind of a platform to make people aware. That is where the doctors association, laboratories, scientists, CROs. A lot of CROs are doing must be doing some work on clinical trials involving stem cell with who are facing problem. And there is a question that has possibly come on the timeline. So regulators, apart from ICMRs getting involved, regulators also have to play a significant role in marrying with these particular science that, hey, this science has some positivity, and if properly done with proper legislation, I think it is going to really happen. So I'll sum up by answering three. First, we need to develop a collaborative efforts involving regulators and agencies like ICMR. Number two, we need to have a proper research infrastructures, uh, developing good labs as well as scientists. And third, we need an adequate legislation to push this science. And that is why there is one question which has come that samples for stem cells are collected free in various camps. It could be saliva, it could be just nasal mucosa. But when matching happens, there are charges like 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs, 10 lakhs, and whether it is genuine or not. Because collecting sample is just like, let me give you an example of COVID testing. You would have seen on television that people wrote down the glass of car, they collect a nasopharyngeal or a pharyngeal or oral swab. They don't charge anything. But when test happens, they're supposed to pay some money, which is 4,500, as decided by the law. Same way, the stem cell samples that is collected is just a sample of saliva or mucosa or some mucus. But when they go to the lab and that lab processes those stem cells, there is a huge mechanism of matching, HLA typing. Unless that happens, like for example, not everybody can just, hey, sir, I want to donate kidney and my brother needs kidney, take my kidney. It doesn't happen. It happens only in movies. You need proper matching. That requires some kind of technology which consumes some money, which is expensive at the moment. And that is where I was trying to say that is where I think we need to play a huge role on taking this particular science leapfrog in country. But when I'm, we need new law. We need some developing some legal ecosystem for a wonderful science. The doctor in me says that stem cells are great, provided they are done ethically, legally, and with some application, not from commercial point of view, but purely from the motive the patient who is not amenable to regular treatment. So we need to develop that ecosystem, and developing ecosystem for something which is very new. And when there is no clear-cut law, we need to how to create that ecosystem. And I'm so happy that Nishit is sitting here and I can see him. So Nishit, I want to ask you this question that it's a amazing science, uh, great hope, and the problem is the balance between being ethical and being legal. To me, being ethical is heart and being legal is head, and always there is that conflict between head and heart. So how that ecosystem that India should develop purely from law and regulations point of view, and who else but you who have been talking on ecosystems for India for last 2 3 days in 2 3 webinars. So I want your thoughts for 3 4 minutes.
Okay, very first reaction I have, and the lesson that I've learned from Professor Yunus is that we create the world that we want. We shape the world that we want. So I think first of all, we have to be also clear that how we want to go about. Now, when it comes to ethics, it is direct correlation to philosophy. What has happened in India that we are so obsessed with sometimes engineering, accounting, even law and other kind of spaces, we have given backseat to philosophers. I think we need to have more philosophers in India who generally come out of liberal arts schools. And liberal arts schools have again taken a backseat. If I say I'm a student of art and you are a student of medicine, everybody knows who is smarter, who is better. So the whole, I'm dumb, right? Because I go to art. Now, the thing is that it is so much correlation to philosophy ultimately. Sometimes a lot of things may be legally right, but ethically wrong, right? That's what we are talking. And number two, that, there could be number of perspective, number of different ways in which you look at the same thing. And therefore, when it comes to ethics, it is important that there is some kind of collaborative effort. So collaboration between philosophers and the scientists, and because science and philosophy often, or some people have been in conflict often. Now, there is also a time that something what was not ethical at one point of time is perfectly ethical today. What was considered ethical at one point of time is considered unethical today. So with society and with other kind of stuff, things do keep on changing. So we have to really come together and develop some degree of consensus that is this something good or not good? There are few things that you will clearly, get an answer to. For example, commercialization of particular thing, right? What you're doing in the stem cell, either collection or otherwise. So again, there will be also ethical issues because somebody is poor and somebody wants to donate or help out the community, but there's no means to live. No, we do not compensate something. So there are various issues, but so long as the consent is free, fair, open, well informed, some of those things are very important in anything that we do. And to what extent you can, take it. To some extent, it may be okay. Beyond a point, it may not be okay. So how do you pave this way forward is something that can be done collectively by professionals like you, by scientists, by doctors, regulators. So that's how the society goes on. And I think some kind of consensus can be developed. You cannot be overly, I would say, sensitive because science is a matter of risk as well. Okay, so to what extent the risk should be permitted and where it should stop, but and where because in law there are two or three things like there's contractual liabilities and there are tortious liabilities when you do wrong to somebody else, even though it is not in the law. In common law, you can sue for damages, but there is third dimension which is ethical, so which is not a tort, which is not a law or illegal, but at the same time it doesn't sound right. And I think those are the judgmental calls we have to take. And at the end of the day, I think we have to move forward. Stem cell technology has huge advantages. It has a number of benefits, but at the same time, it is also fraught with issues that have never been known or understood enough. Only experiment will teach us. One has to tread a little cautiously, but at the same time try to see how best we can benefit the humanity at large. I think that would be my way of looking at things. Yeah.
No wonder people call you philosophical lawyer, Nishit Bhai. I think we have touched upon almost all questions, and there was one question on CRISPR and interplay between CRISPR and the stem cells. Yes, and I think answer has been that, and also given that when it is applied for embryonic genetically modified embryo, it is not permitted. But when you talk of a relationship between CRISPR and stem cells, yes, because the CRISPR is, in fact, we are going to discuss CRISPR next Friday, and we are going to discuss the designer baby concept in India next Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure. But coming back, and we are going to discuss CRISPR at length on that webinar. Now, CRISPR has a very unique ability to enable genomic phenotypic screens, and these screens allow stem cells to be investigated on the screen. So these types of screens are widely used in stem cells. That could be one interplay. But I think we have covered everything, and Nishit Bhai gave a very excellent uh, dimension to the entire science, that how exactly it can leapfrog. And though we had kept question mark, I would like to put not a question but maybe some semicolon, that yes, India can leapfrog, and as Nishit Bhai mentioned, need a proper collaborations between all the stakeholders, right from regulator to scientists to doctors to lawyers, to come together and come out with some robust action items, robust ecosystem that would definitely help this science to the next height. But it is very rightly said. So many people, Gandhiji said, and Arthur Schroeder said, that anything new that comes, which is possibly good, is immediately ridiculed. After some time, it gets criticized. After that, it gets tried. Then people start accepting it, and then it becomes, it is said that it becomes a kind of a self-evident as a success. That is what possibly the stem cell therapy is in India. So thank you very much for being attentive and listening to this very interesting but slightly technical subject. But in our experience, we are seeing a lot of stem cell players coming into India, as well as a lot of Indian companies are also working on stem cells. So there is definitely a hope, and I'm sure we are going to leapfrog and reach next height. Thank you very much.